Hello, you are listening to Dr. Sushma Singh today in Unit 8 Gandhian Perspective on Development. Let us start the lecture with the topic Alternative Viewpoint. Development and progress as goals are based upon an ideal world of buttons as solutions wherein the increasingly impressive and complex tasks are accomplished by the push of a button or the switch of a lever. Gandhi argues, however, that the technologies of creation of comfort are also able to generate discomfort and destruction. He pointed out that what is good for saving lives may lead very quickly to a spin off production that ends lives. The mechanical principles that allow the construction of ambulances and trains are also the basis for the construction of guns capable of killing thousands in the most minor of border skirmishes. In the case of lawyers, for instance, conflict resolution is so painless and so sanitized that motivated lawyers advance quarrels instead of repress them. Similarly, doctors become so good at cleaning up the damage one can sustain that people stop being careful for coping up with their pain. As Gandhi put it, I am cured, I overeat again and I take his pills again. In both examples, modern civilization first presumes a competitive, unkind, and disconnected subject, then designs a system to treat them that subject. It is here that the myopia of modern civilization becomes apparent. While particular acts may seem justifiable, for example, one man plows a vast track by means of steam engines and can thus amass great wealth. In a broader context, it may be less so. Mass mechanized farming may produce more, but it may also destroy crop diversity, flood the local market, displace workers, cause pollution, and be unsustainable only within a very limited short term context. Would it seem scientific and even optimal? Gandhi opposed what he considered a colonial attempt at reducing the world to its component parts. As he prophetically complained, they wish to convert the whole world into a vast market for their goods. For him, this would be to rob the world of its important spiritual and personal contact, to enslave it into being a commodity. Against this perception, Gandhi offers the model of real civilization as rooted in spiritual and intellectual tradition. Gandhi does not advocate simple destruction of the edifices of modern civilization but contests and opposes its ideological tenets, calling for change in our mentality, the way we think. Of course, Gandhi's critique was not without ample, though often meaningless, responses from defenders of development. The retorted usually focused on one, both the comparative failure of Gandhi's paradigm to produce more and on the ignorance and anarchy associated with the traditional. These arguments are classically symptomatic of the kind of myopia and paranoia of modern civilization's assessment of others. For Gandhi, one of the dangers of this discourse was its ability to convince people to think within the framework of the development, progress, and civilization. This encouraged a kind of Orientalism in them, wherein no one is superior to the Promethean defenders of development and all others are judged by the internal standards of technology. Many claimed the village was a bastion of ignorance and violence. Gandhi's rejoinder is simple. Just to criticize modern civilization is not to endorse all things that are not modern civilization. And enemy are not necessarily our friends. Rather, Gandhi supported the idea to prevent ignorance, poverty, and viciousness in the village, but not going about doing this by the means of modern civilization. While critics could understand that Gandhi's vision of Hind Swaraj was not interchangeable with the savagery, they did think that it both encouraged primitivism and that modern civilization was a better solution to these problems than what they considered realistic alternatives. To an extent, others did agree with Gandhi. It was often because they thought they had found a useful tactic, a strategic tool that could salvage from Gandhi's thought. This fundamentally misses the point of the critique because it tries to incorporate its conclusions back into the system of its critics. Instead, the real source of the impasse between the Gandhi's critic and modern civilization's defenders was the incommensurability of their discourses. Gandhi considers Nehru as a political ally at the best of the option and a personal friend. However, they never saw eye to eye on issues of development and technology. Gandhi described this as a big difference of opinion between them. Instead, Nehru took Gandhi's criticism as an obscurest text and restated the tenets of modern civilization. He felt it might not be perfect, but if we can provide better homes for more people, then we must do that. Nehru deployed the typical demand of almost ologistic immediacy as a requirement for practice of the theory. Congress should not lose itself in arguments over such matters which can probably produce great confusion in people's mind, resulting in an inability to act in the present. Now let us conclude the lesson. It may be understood that the Gandhian perspective on development is holistic in the sense that it encompasses social, economic, and spiritual growth in the syndrome. The two major themes that were undercurrents in some of his most influential writing and speeches in the context of development were the use of the spinning wheel and the importance of khadi, and local self-governance and self-reliance for social and economic development. What is more important to note is the fact that it does not emphasize material progress and growth. Instead, it argues in favor of self-development and self-reliance through decentralization of control. He was sure that empowering of the village people and strengthening the village economy were critical factors in the process of development. In fact, meaningful development was one in which the principles of Swadeshi, among others, were adhered to. Here we want to end the unit and as well as lecture. Thanks for listening.